We're all familiar with the beautiful story of the Magi, who arrive in Bethlehem after a long journey from the east, drawn by a star in the sky, seeking the newborn King of the Jews in order to see him, worship him, and give him gifts. It's a beautiful image of what is coming, of God's work in the world, as he gathers in Gentiles from every corner of the earth to follow and worship that newborn king, not only of the Jews, but of all the world, of the kingdom of heaven. Well, today I want to focus in on one particular detail of that story, which we often fail to appreciate, and that is the particulars of the gift that the Magi brought. If you remember, the Magi bring to the baby Jesus gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, as we read that story very often, we just think, well, okay, rich, lovely gifts fit for a king, brought by these prosperous travelers from the east, of course. Just fancy, rich gifts. But there's more than that. Because you see, God, in his sovereignty, is able to write into the details of history the way that an author of fiction who controls their own story can write into their story. Your significant details, important images, foreshadowing, things like that. God, in his sovereignty, can do that in actual history. And so while the Magi were doubtless just thinking of their gift as a gift, something fit for the King of the Jews, in fact, God had providentially worked out the details and the specifics of their gift to offer a beautiful image of who it was that they were coming to worship. So let's think about each one of these elements of the gifts that the Magi brought. First, they bring gold. Gold, which is the metal of kings, always associated with royalty throughout human history. Gold means kingliness. Well, what's the next part of the gift? Frankincense. Frankincense, which in the Old Testament, and also really in ancient cultures generally, was associated with priests. If we look in Leviticus, very often the offerings were mixed with or associated with frankincense. And then more generally in the Old Testament, God often in the prophets uses frankincense to represent the priestly office and the priestly offerings. And then thirdly, myrrh. Myrrh, which was simply a sweet-smelling aroma, but which also was particularly associated with the preparation of dead bodies. It was used for funeral preparations. In fact, we are told in John 19, that Jesus' body itself was prepared with myrrh, among other things. So what do these three elements paint a picture of for us? They paint a picture of a priest-king, one who comes to rule, but to rule as a priest, one who mediates between God and man, who offers sacrifices for the atonement of his people. And what is that sacrifice? In the case of Jesus, it's a sacrifice of his own dead body, died for us, for the sins of the world, of course, to be raised again, but first, really dead. So dead, in fact, that his body had to be prepared with myrrh. So for the Magi, their gifts were just gifts. But in God's providence, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh paint for us a beautiful foreshadowing of who it was they had come to worship, who it is we also should worship, the priest king who offers himself as a sacrifice for the sins of the world.